What is your most proud achievement from everything?
I did get to interview Billie Jean King on a stage ahead of International Women's Day in 2020, just before the pandemic.
What does the word ambition mean to you?
I would say I am an ambitious person, and I think ambition means always striving for your own best. I want to give and achieve my absolute best, and hopefully it will also be the best, and I'll be the winner.
If you could go back in time and do one thing differently, what would it be?
I would take more time to enjoy my professional cycling career. I was so ambitious and impatient and dissatisfied with my results. I didn't spend many days going, wow, I'm getting paid to ride a bike in Italy. It wasn't very fun.
Welcome to 40G. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of 40G, the podcast keeping more girls and women in sport and empowering the next generation of female athletes. Now, we talk a lot on this show about what it takes to get to the elite level in women's sport. But today, I want to talk about something slightly different. What it takes to keep going, keep building, and keep reinventing yourself to forge your own path when it doesn't look like anyone else's. Today's guest has had more careers than most people have in decades. Dr. Bridie O'Donnell is a medical doctor, a former professional cyclist, world hour record holder at the age of 41, the first woman to commentate the Tour de France for SBS, and the inaugural head of the Victorian Government's Office for Women in Sport and Recreation. She's also an author, a former Collingwood board member, and someone who has never once stayed in the lane that she was told to stay in. This is a conversation about what happens when you refuse to be one thing and what that can actually cost you. Before we get into it, please subscribe to 4TG on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Share this episode with someone who needs it. And if you want to support the show, head to Buy Me a Coffee. All the links are in the show notes. Let's get into it. Well, Bridie O'Donnell, welcome to the 4TG podcast.
It's so good to be here. Thank you.
I'm very excited for this one, as I am for all of them, but this one particularly because your CV is probably the thickest that we've had on this show. Where do you get the time to do all these things?
Well, I'm very old. I'm a child-free person. So, people with kids have a lot more demand on their lives, on their days. But I think also it's a little bit about building on the stuff you've done before to help you do things later. It's not like you're doing whole sort of careers that are separate from each other. They're kind of, you learn stuff, you take it to the next thing.
Yeah. So you're not reinventing the wheel, using those transferable skills that sport teaches, does it not?
It certainly does.
It certainly does, which we will get into absolutely. Now, before we get into our Snap Fitness rapid fire question, I want to ask you one question. What does the word ambition mean to you?
I would say I am an ambitious person, and I think ambition means always striving for your own best. Sometimes you think that should be the best, but ambitious is really, I want to do my best every single time. You're not trying to just phone it in or just show up. Now, lots of people have to just show up and phone it in lots of times. Life gets in the way. But ostensibly, I believe that I'm an ambitious person because when I start something or when I approach something or when I'm focused on something, I want to give and achieve my absolute best, and hopefully it will also be the best, and I'll be the winner. Now, in sport, obviously, it's so subjective because there's literally a result sheet, particularly in cycling, and you see where your name is on that list, and it's very rarely at the top. If you play footy, you've got a 50% chance of winning every week. In cycling, you don't win very much. Even the sprinters, even the climbers don't win as much as they want, and then the other hundreds of schleppers are just like happy to be there and help out. But I think ambitious is about, how do I apply myself and be diligent and show up and be disciplined and be really focused and keep doing that every single day so you can give your best.
And it's funny because ambitious people, are often asked, will you ever be satisfied? What do you think about that?
I think when you're younger, you're often not. And that's why I think the word perfectionist is a toxic sort of word because and a lot of athletes, musicians, dancers, etc., do focus on perfection, and then everything below that is failure or a disappointment. So I think as a younger athlete, definitely, I thought that it had to look a certain way, the result had to be a certain way for it to be deemed positive or a good outcome. And now I think actually It's the effort's in the process. Sorry, the reward is sometimes in that process of like sitting back and going, okay, well, maybe the environment, the context, the job I was in, the relationship I was in, whatever it is that you're assessing, there's other people involved. You don't get to control all those variables. So you have to be able to sit back sometimes and go, I did everything I could, but I was a bit too old, or I was a bit too inexperienced, or I wasn't, or the dynamic was with X number of other people and they didn't also have the same focus. And so here we are.
That's right. And I guess leaving no stone unturned, and that's something that you have lived out and still are living out at the moment. So that, yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into that and just seeing how your mind ticks, and obviously giving the viewers and listeners something to learn and hopefully they can implement in their own lives and journeys. So for our Snap Fitness rapid fire questions, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. Whatever comes to mind, you just shoot. Okay. Ready to roll?
Am I allowed more than one word?
You're allowed more than one word. We'll be lenient there. All right. If you could go back in time and do one thing differently, what would it be?
I would take more time to enjoy my professional cycling career. I was so ambitious and impatient and dissatisfied with my results. I didn't spend many days going, wow, I'm getting paid to ride a bike in Italy. It wasn't very fun.
Yes. We're going to get into that a bit later too. So just bookmark that one. All right. Number 2, what's your guilty pleasure?
Reality television.
Oh, any favourites?
The worser, the betterer.
You're a maths fan?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, actually, maths is becoming like a pretty horrible kind of train wreck now. I think we're seeing more and more like really awful behaviour that is being enabled by producers, and that's a whole other podcast. But I think early seasons, early editions of things like Survivor and The Amazing Race and The Bachelor and The Bachelorette and maths, sometimes when you've got a big job, or you, like when I was working in the pandemic response for the Victorian government, sometimes you want to watch trashy TV.
Switch off. Yeah, white noise.
Yeah.
What about Farmer Wants a Wife?
Never watched it.
Never watched it? I think that's one that I don't know how many seasons they're in. It's still wholesome. It's still pure.
I like wholesome.
Yeah. So anyway, maybe put that one on your list in all your spare time. All right. And finally, what was one self-limiting belief that you had to overcome to get to where you are today?
I think because I started sport late, I didn't think I had any talent. So I thought I had to work harder than everyone else, and I couldn't skip any days, and I had to do the full training program even if it nearly broke me. And I used to watch athletes who were talented or told that they were good and enabled and supported be a bit more lazy. And some of them were probably listening to their bodies more effectively. But I was like, must catch up, must do more, must try and, I'm not tall enough, so I have to do more reps, you know? So I was often a slave to the training program. And I was then often a little bit slightly overdone, which you can do in endurance sports.
Yeah.
You can train too much and you don't get injured, but you're just never quite in the form you need.
Yeah. So you're constantly sort of overcompensating for those years almost that you think that you've missed out on. So in that vein, now you haven't taken a conventional athletic pathway to become a professional athlete. You obviously were a doctor first. You studied at the University of Queensland. You were a surgical assistant. And then you decided to get into professional cycling. So if we take it back even a step further, I'm keen to know, what role did sport play in your childhood?
I was a really active kid, and through primary school, like I played netball for the Burnside Chipmunks. I was a gold defence. Played team sports in school, and I was okay at them, you know, good enough. But I would constantly look up at the, A team and think, how come I'm not in the A team? Why am I the captain of the C's? My dad had played rugby for Brothers Rugby Union. This was in Queensland. My mum had played a little bit of netball, but we weren't a sporty family. So my dad sort of begrudgingly drove me to touch footy every weekend, because touch football is a massive sport in Queensland. And this was before women were playing rugby sevens. So it was a very similar type of game. And I'm not a fast person. So I was out, kind of on the link or sort of near the middle. And Dad said he would hear some other dad say, bloody number 12, she's useless. And he'd say, oh, that's my daughter's number 12. So I was okay. But I think that what I learned in those years was there are always going to be people better than you. Sometimes it's luck. Sometimes it's because they've got better DNA. They picked better parents. They've just got different fast twitch fibers, whatever. It's not that the world owes me anything. The world doesn't owe me to be great when I'm 11 or 14 or 16. So in a way that created a real hunger and an ambition, but it also meant that I was surrounded by people who were better than me all the time. And I genuinely think that's fantastic. I don't know what it must be like until the last few years of my career to be the best one there. When I became a triathlete, when I was in med school, it was just at the time when the best women triathletes in the world were all in Queensland. Women like Kylie Jones, who won a silver medal at the Olympics and went on to become a pilot for a blind triathlete. Emma Carney, Claire Carney, Loretta Harrop, Jackie Gallagher, all of these women that could run like a 33-minute 10K off the bike. So I could swim okay, bike pretty well, and then I'd get off the bike at Noosa Triathlon in the pro division and I'd run 40 minutes, which, I mean, I would dream to run 40 minutes now. But I would think, I'm so rubbish. I'm the worst person here. And I'd be running there on my own and the pack was like way ahead of me. And the crowd's like, that's nice, girl. So I was constantly looking up at better people than me. And I think that what that did was shape hunger in me. And also then they're modelling what world class looks like. Again, I think that's really underrated. I don't think you want to be the best kid in your team and then the best kid at the school, because what ends up happening is then you get a big culture shock when you finally hit the actual pool of really good 16 or 18-year-olds, and suddenly if you don't have that work ethic, you're going to go, this is rubbish. I don't want to do this anymore. And certainly even by the time I did Ironman triathlon, I was a good swim biker, and then I got off the bike in Hawaii Ironman in a pretty good position, and then you'd hear these little teeny tiny women running up behind you going, good job, great job. And I just got overtaken by just what seemed like thousands of women.
Yeah.
So I finished Hawaii and I thought, yeah, but I really want to win Hawaii. But I kind of assessed my physiology, my time. I was a junior doctor and I thought, if I really want to try and win Hawaii, this could be a 5 to 10 year goal. I'm going to have to quit my job. I just thought, nah. And I lost too many toenails doing the marathon.
Yeah, can't have that.
No, you need them. Apparently they're quite useful.
Yeah.
So that's when I was part of this talent transfer program in cycling. And then that kind of, all those years of being in an endurance sport actually stood me in really good stead for talent ID, for time trialing. And then I guess I became that person. I was the best person in the country and then went over to race the rest of the women in the world and got my ass handed to me.
There's real beauty of being the small fish in a big pond, right? And I've noticed that now with a lot of the younger AFLW talent coming through, or they come through Coates leagues and they are the best player in that league. They then move to your VFL or your AFLW. They are no longer the best player and their attitude shifts completely, and a lot of them either drop out, they, don't perform well because they've always been patted on the back and told how good they are. And it's often the more underrated players who've never been told they're the best, but they constantly show up. They're consistent. They've got that determination, that hunger. They then go on to become the best players. So I think there's something beautiful about being the small fish and being empowered by the people around you and inspired, as opposed to jealous and, have this sense of angst when they're not the best. Have you felt that?
Yeah, and I think to be curious also. So even if you're really good at a particular drill and you're showing up to training and coach is constantly using you as the example, you're not going to be good at everything. Or even if you magically are the best at every single activity, look around and notice the things that your other teammates are doing really well, or work out how do I be more consistent in this? How do I be able to do it under pressure? I mean, it's the same with cycling, that you can be really strong on an ergo or on a bike. You can push out a lot of power, and we see men and women on Beach Road in $20,000 bikes and going really fast. Can you ride fast when you're tired? Can you ride fast when it's raining? What about when the team's been losing 4 days in a row? How do you keep showing up and stay motivated and be a good teammate when morale is low? I commentate the Tour de France now, and we sometimes get to the third week of the tour and we're looking at some of these teams. They've lost 4 or 5 riders through crashes and injury. What must the vibes be like on that bus every morning? They're driving to the start line. All of their riders are in the bottom section of the results list every day. No one's going to win the race. No one's going to win the stage. So how do we also be good leaders and show up for each other and show up for our teammates? Because just because you can kick goals well doesn't mean you're a good person to be around. So I always feel like there's that thing that your listeners could probably Google. You can Google, what are the 10 things that require no talent? Things like showing up on time, be coachable, listen to advice, be respectful of your teammates, do the homework, do the eating, the sleeping, the stretching, the equipment cleaning. None of that requires any talent whatsoever. And there are so many stories of WNBA players and golfers and women who are playing professional sport everywhere who say, as a teenager and an adolescent and a young woman, I did all of those boring things. Oh, and I'm Sue Bird or Megan Rapinoe or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But they don't get there by being complacent and selfish.
And often those things go unrecognised and unnoticed. So, if you're not getting a pat on the back, they think, oh, well, it's a waste of my time. But they're the things that compound.
Coaches notice it. I think they do. That said, I also know, and I've talked to some of the AFLW players that I mentor about this, sometimes when you're strong and reliable, people can take you for granted. They're really focused on the noisy but very talented athlete who's a bit injured all the time, or a little bit more dramatic or a little bit more emotional, and you're there showing up and being yourself and consistent and reliable every day, and they might not give you the time and energy that you need and want. And one of the athletes I was talking to about this, we said she needs to go to the coach or the assistant coach and say, I need from you to start our feedback session by telling me all the stuff I've been doing really well. Because strong people, successful people, we need feedback too, as in praise. We need praise, and then we can go to, because usually high-performing people are very quick to go to the thing which is, I stuffed that bit up and I didn't do that. And someone says, yeah, but you also did all these amazing things. Or you're playing in the World Cup. And they go, I know, but I just missed that one kick. So athletes are very good at focusing on our own flaws. I think what we often need from our teammates and our coaches is, hey, I just want to say, you are amazing. I love the way you keep showing up so consistently and you're always on time, and don't think I'm not noticing that. Okay, let's work on your kicking.
Yeah, 100%. And if we look now to fast forwarding to when you decided to go pro cycling, what was that decision like? Why at that age of, was it 30?
109.
109 did you decide to go professional?
Well, I had just passed my Part 1 exams to become a specialist, a sports physician, which is a really hard process. You're doing these exams and for years and studying, etc. And at the same time, I'd gone overseas to do a bike race where I'd performed really well. And then I came home, raced the nationals and won the national title. And so the College of Sports Medicine said, all right, you've done well, you've passed, we'll let you in for our 4-year training program. And when you finish, you become a qualified sports physician. And the national team said, hey, why don't you come and be a member of the national team, Australian national team in Varese in Italy, and be part of the Australian team. And you race throughout the season and then you aim to get a professional contract afterwards. And I was like, sign me up. I was getting paid €12,000.
Oh.
And I gave up my spot in the College of Sports Medicine, something I'd been studying for 3 years after a 6-year medical degree and 5 years of working, to sleep in a bunk bed and try and qualify for the Beijing Olympics.
Wow.
And I didn't qualify. In fact, I was almost humiliated would be the right word. I went to the qualifying time trial in Switzerland to try and get this one spot for the time trial for the Olympics. And the time trial was up a mountain, and I'm not 45 kilos. So, but for me, I think, I was 34 or 33 at the start of the year, and I just thought, well, sure, I'm older than everybody else, but like, I am never going to get offered a spot on a national team. I'm never going to be the national champion and be in this kind of physical shape ever again. Now, as it turned out, I stayed in great shape and got even faster and better as I got older. But I think what it did was I really genuinely weighed up the risks and benefits. And the thing with sport, though, is you have to do it when your body is willing. You can keep being a musician or a painter or a writer or whatever for most of your life until your brain doesn't want to work anymore. But your body does have limitations that your mind doesn't, I think. So I just didn't feel like it was actually a very hard choice. Everyone in my life was like, what? My parents, not that... It wasn't that it was shameful, but I just think they thought, what are you doing? Like, you're not really an athlete. Why? You're a doctor now. Like, here's the doctor path. And doctors are pretty conservative. They go to med school, they specialise, and they just keep getting really, really good at less and less information until they're that, like, the right elbow guy. And that's who you want to see when you break your right elbow. So I just feel like we don't always give people enough space in their careers to say, so why do you want to do this? What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is I race for a season in Europe and then I come back and go, I don't want to do this anymore, and I go back to being a doctor, which is what I did. And then I went again with the national team, and then I was offered a pro contract because I was the number 1 cyclist in the country, and I got offered this amazing contract in an amazing new team, which was an absolute disaster.
I think with that, especially during school, we almost get told that success is linear and there's a blueprint to how a career should go. And if you go against that grain, well, people think you're mad. But the compounding effect, again, of the experiences that you will get from stepping outside of that path and, you know, becoming an athlete or going after what you want, because as you say, there is a bit of a shelf life as an athlete, unfortunately. So if you don't take it by the horns and give it everything that you could have, you're going to sort of look back and think, God, what could have I done?
Yeah.
So I think there needs to be more encouragement from schools, from parents to go and explore what you want. You can always come back and be the doctor, or you can always fall back on that, and it's never too late to do that. But sometimes take for granted the ability to go after athletic adventures, or not even athletic adventures, like go and travel while you're young and have a gap year and go and sort of tick off all those things that you want to do before you get onto the career train. And that can also change too, as you've
Absolutely, it can. I also think that Australians hold sport very dearly. It's a strong currency for us. It's national pride. We're seeing it play out now with the World Cup, and we've seen it play out with the Women's Cricket World Cup. We hold on to our identity as athletes very strongly. Now, if we look at the health and well-being side of Australia, we're actually not a very healthy country. We've got high rates of obesity and sedentary kids, and a lot of people with chronic disease, and we don't have awesome infrastructure that allows people to walk and ride to school and uni and stuff. So we have a bit of a myth that we're all incredible athletes. What I think and what I know a lot of people experience is if they are not designated as talented or athletic or sporty at school, then they just do nothing. Now, there's nothing wrong with just walking and gym and Pilates and being involved in recreation or activity that you love that's kind of mildly competitive and not elite. I'm not saying everyone should be an elite athlete, but just because you weren't awesome at 13 or 15 or 19, I am living proof, that doesn't mean it's over. And so, yes, there are some very tricky sports. Like there's no way gymnastics or swimming or tennis is going to go, oh, you're 30 and you really want to be good at it. That's nice. I mean, we know there are sports that really focus on youth. They focus on body shape and size, and that unfortunately, gymnastics is a lot easier when you're tiny than when you're an adult-sized body. But I just think other people around us sometimes are very quick to say, oh, well, I like that you like that, but here's all the things that could go wrong, instead of saying, wow, that sounds amazing. Is there anything we should go do to explore what that would look like for you? Could you do it part-time while you're also going to uni or school? Could you travel a bit, take a gap year? Like, be open to this bit in the middle. It's not just like sport or nothing, elite or nothing. It can be experimentation and exploration.
I'm interested now to talk about your experience being an elite athlete, an elite female cyclist in an era where there really wasn't a functioning ecosystem for female cyclists. So what did it look like day to day being a female cyclist when you were professional over in Italy?
We were just starting to see some of the teams, not mine, get investment from good sponsors. So after a bike race, you're using a wet washer to wipe dirt off your arms to get back in a car to drive 8 hours back to the team house. But there would be this team where they had a bus and a shower in there, and air conditioning. Now all the pro teams have buses and showers and air conditioning and a soigneur to do your washing, and they've got the infrastructure and the support staff like the men, pretty much like the men's teams, and enough soigneurs on the side of the road to hand you biddens and stuff. But yeah, ours was kind of run by pirates and not good ones. And so you do find yourself thinking, how am I supposed to perform at my best in this environment? Team director smoking in the car while you're driving back from the race for 6 hours. Like not performance enhancing. So it's challenging. But again, my coach back here in Australia, I would Skype with her and she would just say, you know what, you can't control any of that. You've got to focus on eating well, sleeping well, preparing, psychologically getting yourself in the right space. So now I'm so relieved that we see pretty much all of the women being paid in the peloton. There's a minimum wage that is improved. There are some women on massive salaries. There's really strong infrastructure. There's great promotion of these teams. So social media is a huge way to promote women's cycling. And yet I did so many races that were never broadcast. Now, this isn't about I need more attention and love on myself as an athlete. It's, as we all know, when you show world-class athletes to the world, they love it. They lap it up. Look at the Olympics every year. Everyone goes, wow, I never knew I liked equestrian. But when you have great broadcast, great commentary and world-class performances, people get interested. Look at the billions of people who watched the 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup. And that was when the US women's national team wasn't getting paid the same as the men. So what we know is if you show these people to the world, these women to the world, people will want to watch. And that's what we're seeing now. Tour de France Femmes, its new iteration, is in its 5th year this year. They had 7 million people watching it on the roadside last year. Wow. And millions watching all over the world on TV. So if you build it and show it, people want to watch it. I would have dreamed to be part of that this era, but I'm very privileged that I get to talk about it.
Yeah. How was it mentally back then? Like, I assume you didn't have the resources, you didn't have the pay. What was the stigma or stereotype of being a female cyclist?
Oh, it was hard because it felt a little bit like an amateur shit show, if I can say that. It felt disorganised, or it felt a huge amount of scrutiny about your body. So there were generally teams all run by men who had young women on their teams, and they would say, you're too fat, you need to eat less. So there was a definite culture of self-loathing and eating disordered behaviour. And as we know with cycling, being as lean as possible does actually help you climb mountains faster. So people are often teetering right on that edge of having disordered relationships with food whilst trying to generate a lot of power and speed on a bike. You didn't get paid. I mean, there was, financial abuse, sexual harassment, bullying, discrimination. I mean, I'm sure those things were happening in some of the lower level men's teams as well. But you have 14 women on a roster and a couple of old blokes running the team, and it's just not a safe environment for a lot of them. And my teammates were either Italian or Russian or Ukrainian. And for a lot of them, this was their actual life pathway. Winning a stage of a race or winning the Italian national champions jersey for that year would have been life-changing. So I realised also how privileged I was. There I am with a medical degree, safe family environment back home, people who care about me and love me and would like me even if I didn't succeed. So I think that meant for very challenging dynamics.
Yeah. And you said you're living, in a bunk bed with all your Italian teammates. You obviously went over there. Did you know Italian before you went over there?
Not really.
No.
I spoke it fluently by the end of the first year.
Yeah. So how was that? Was that isolating when you're
Really
over there and
isolating.
can't speak?
It makes you feel like a toddler. And if you're someone like me who thinks, I can communicate well, I'm a good storyteller and I can have a conversation with you, you're literally speaking like monosyllables and saying, what time training? That's all you can say in Italian. And they just would look at me and you could see them rolling their eyes like, Bridie. And they'd be like, she's a dog though? Come on. She seems so stupid.
Time.
Yeah. They call me Moroni, which is moron. Right. Or cretino, which is a cretin. So it was really supportive.
Yeah.
But immersion works, if you are thrust in an environment and you're learning. So I was using like Translate and then Duolingo wasn't around, but those kinds of things, doing my best. I remember getting to the end of that first pro season. My team director wasn't going to pay me my salary. He was like evading the whole conversation. And I said, I'm not going to bring the bike back that you need until you pay me. And we had this whole conversation in Italian and I was even doing this. And I thought, shit, I speak Italian now.
I'm fluent now.
I'm having an argument. And in Italy, they do, it's a stereotype, but they do yell a lot. And so I would sometimes say to my teammates, why is everyone so mad? And she said, we're not mad. We're just talking. So, but like hearing information over a race radio while you're in a bike race in the wind and rain in Italian is very challenging.
It would be a disadvantage for sure.
A little bit.
But you got through. Tell us a bit about cycling itself, because it's an ultimate team sport, right? You've each got your role. What was your role within that team?
I was a domestique, and that's kind of the French word for slave.
Good.
But you're there to facilitate other players' results. And in a way, you could argue that's what a centre and a wing attack are doing in a netball game. They're not actually scoring goals. They're getting it down the end so that the goal shooter or goal attack, and the same with full forward. Not everyone's kicking goals all the time in a footy game. That said, sometimes, like footy, sometimes a random person gets themselves into an opportunity where the odds are in their favour, and tactically it ends up working out that as a non-race winner, you end up winning a stage. And that's what makes the Tour de France as a bike race and the Women's Tour de France to cover so exciting. But generally there are, as you say, it's a team sport, but only one person ends up on the podium. One gold medal at the end or one jersey at the end, as opposed to the whole footy team getting up on the podium at the end of the grand final. But everyone knows what their job is, and you have meetings at the start and they say, okay, so we're going to try and do this and here's the plan, and you have to have a plan B, C, D, all the way down to Z. And you have to be able to communicate while you're under pressure. You have to be marking attacks. Your heart rate might be at 190 and you have to be able to go to your team and go, what's going on? You said you were going to be marking her and we've got to get such and such to the front of the group by the time we get to the bottom of the climb. So smart athletes do really well. You can't be stupid and have no bike IQ and be a great successful rider. And then it's also about managing disappointment. Like basically, as I said earlier, you're not winning very much. So you have to be able to take away from each race or each stage of a multi-day race, what was my goal today? Maybe I just wanted to get into the break. Maybe I wanted to ride closer to the front. Maybe I wanted to hide more and conserve my energy and sprint at the end. And each time I'm just going to go, yeah, that was a little bit better than last time. But early on, I was judging it as like, where did I come in the race? 83rd. That's bad. But I met a few pros while I was over there in training, and they would just say to me, you just got to be able to set individual goals, and then the team will have a goal, and you all debrief at the end of the day. And if you're in a good team, you have a healthy, honest debrief and say, we didn't quite get there. Our sprinter got fourth. We need to do better. What do we need to do differently?
What does a good team look like?
Let's use, I think it probably depends on the kind of riders you have, but let's use a team that is trying to win, let's say, the Tour de France. And we'll use Pauline Ferrand-Prévot. She's the French woman who won the Women's Tour de France last year. A good team looks like a clear race leader. A different woman is a road captain. she's the one that's making the calls about what's happened or letting people know or deciding who should go back to the car for biddens. You've got a few domestiques and lackeys that you get to boss around and go back to the car, get 15 biddens, bring them up, which is a lot of work. It's not just it's like being the runner on a footy game, but also playing the game. And you need a great team director who's in the car on the radio, who's calm and says, remember, we're going to turn right up here onto this bridge. It's going to be really narrow. Watch out for potholes, or the wind is going to change direction. You need to be on this side of the road. So that's usually what race radio is about. It's safety tactics around the terrain. And you need great mechanics. You need great soigneurs on the side of the road handing out bottles. And you need, if you think about the arousal required as an athlete to kind of start a race, the race might go for 4 or 5 hours. And then at the end, you've got to do the big thing that you've been doing. So you need to be able to eat a lot and drink a lot and take instructions from your team. And then you need to be able to kind of demonstrate all your physical ability at the end of that 4 or 5 hours. And then be a good teammate, sit on the bus, be kind to each other, don't hog the shower in the bathroom. Team dinner, be good to be around, be a good roommate, and then do it all again. So you're kind of in this 16 hours a day environment with your teammates. It'd be like you living with all of your footy teammates for 3 weeks, eating together, sleeping together, sometimes sharing rooms. It's
Chaos.
hard work.
Yeah.
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 And everyone's going to go through different. Some people are going to wake up some mornings and go, I'm having a shocker. I'm getting my period and I feel terrible. I fell off yesterday and I feel terrible. I wanted to win the stage yesterday and I haven't won a stage yet. And now that's it. No more sprint stages. So everyone's morale is going to be at different places over the course of that time. And the road captain has to manage that a bit, or the GC leader, the woman who's likely to win the race, has to manage it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like, we talk about sport and just the parallels it has in high performance teams, in work and everything. And I think the key fact there is knowing your role and playing your role. And you don't need to be the best at everything, because that's what a team is for, right? Like, you might be the best at the mountain climbs and your teammate might be the protector that, which is what you were, and does all the grunt work to get there. I think young athletes now think that they need to be the best at everything, but really they should know what they are best at, their strengths, and really hone in on them, because their teammate will complement what their weaknesses are. So I think there's more to know about, really, instead of looking at all your deficiencies, look at what you are efficient in and you bring to the team.
Absolutely. And also be able to not only be able to communicate that, but to go up and, we see this a lot in women's footy of go up, touch your teammate on the shoulder, let them know you're there, tell them how you're going, say I'm feeling good when the ball comes back down this end. That kind of communication lets that player know she's not alone. And in cycling, you see this a lot. When the helicopter's above the peloton, you'll see riders from the same team riding next to each other, or you might see 2 women from the same country, different teams, but 2 Australian women chatting, and they're just want to have some of that kind of connection, a bit of human connection that just helps distract me for 5 or 10 minutes from the fact that I'm in a bike race and we're going 50k an hour.
Yeah.
And so, you need these moments to allow your arousal to change, to allow your focus to be able to change, and then you need to lock in and do what you need to do.
So how did you go from being a professional cyclist in Italy to then going on to breaking the record for the women's hour record at the age of 41?
Well, I came back from racing in end of 2012 because I couldn't get a contract for a good team. And this was because there were age average laws, which is discriminatory. They'd say a women's team has to have an age average of this. And by being older at the time, I was 38, I was bumping their age average up. So only the rubbish teams were willing to have me. The really great teams would be like, you're too old, we'd rather hire 2 18-year-olds. So I thought, I don't want to ride another season in a rubbish team where that's not good organisation. I think I'm better than that. But the alternative then was to come home. So I started working again part-time as a doctor and managing and running a national road series team here in Australia. So we have a national series and you travel around to other parts of the country in teams of 6 or whatever. And I worked, Total Rush was the sponsor. So we had Rush Women's Team. And it was a great team. We had some awesome women racing in our team. And so I did that in 2013, 14 and 15. And I was constantly going to national championships because they were usually in Victoria and doing well, but never winning again after that, after winning in 2008. And I was still I felt like I just hadn't reached the pinnacle. I thought, I want to be a world champion, an Olympic gold medalist. Haven't done that. And I went to nationals in 2015 and I came second and I was so bitter. They do say second place is silver medalists are the most bitter. Because you're just like, ah.
So close.
And I remember ringing my coach, and it was around the time when some male athletes were doing this hour world record, and it seemed really amazing. And I rang my coach and said, listen, I'm so mad. You know, like I'm in the form of my life. I'm 41. And I came second to to an Olympian who does this for a living. Like, again, here I am focusing on the negative instead of going, wow, I came second. So I said, I think I want to make a crack on the hour world record. And he was like, I don't know, like, you're pretty old and you've never raced on the track. You don't know how to ride a track bike on the velodrome. And for the first time in my life, instead of believing what a person in a position of power and decision-making thought about me, I thought to myself, okay, I guess you're the wrong coach for me then. If you don't believe that a highly motivated athlete can try to do a thing, even if I don't do the thing, I want to try. So I found another coach. And my partner at the time, he was my partner. He still is a rowing coach. We talked about this a lot later, and he always used to say to me, oh my God, if someone came to me and said, I want to do this really audacious but hard thing and I'm going to work really hard, I'd be like, yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah. How can I help?
That's right. So it said a bit more about my coach's lack of imagination, or he just thought, oh, this is too hard or unlikely. So I don't want to be part of it. Anyway, I found a great coach, and then it was about how do I learn how to ride on a velodrome, which is way harder than it looks. Anna Meares makes it look easy. Yeah. How do I do that on the low part of the track where you're trying to go the fastest? You're on a bike with no brakes but also no gears, like one gear. So you're just a fixed wheel. You have to get amazing equipment. It has to be really aerodynamic, and then you have to be able to train yourself to be able to push those pedals for 60 minutes as fast as you can go, but without going above, like you don't want to go over the red line, if you like, and crash out physiologically, I mean. So lots of training, lots of heat sauna training, lots of anti-doping protocols, are getting drug tested every 5 to 8 days. And then finally doing the world record in Adelaide. I wanted to do it at home and at sea level, even though I knew if I did it at altitude, I'd probably go faster because of the thinner air. But I just thought, no, I want to do it in Australia. And so my family came down from Queensland and friends came over to Adelaide, and it was hot as anything. And I broke the world record. And it wasn't, I mean, the record's since been superseded in an amazing couple of efforts. The most cool part of that story of the women who broke it after me is the woman who currently holds it is a mathematician. So, women in STEM have absolutely dominated the hour world record, and that is no surprise to me because it's not just about a physical test. It's about you understanding the science, the aerodynamics, the physiology. So it's kind of cool that I was part of that these Italian, Dutch, American women that have done it over the last few years have all been like quite clever. So I love that.
So from like a whole career of being told you're too old, too slow, your window's closed, what did it mean to you and what did it feel like to cross that finish line and know that, you've done it, you've broken a world record?
It was just so immensely validating. You know how if you've had this small glow of belief in yourself and it hasn't always been able to have the light shine on it, and then suddenly you would feel very shiny because what you're doing is you're proving yourself right. It's less about proving other people wrong. I think I just proved myself right. And I was like, fuck yeah. I believed in myself. I really wanted this. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, not the hour, but the year before and the years and years before. Because if you're in the right state of flow, the hour goes by fast. And any athlete who's had a beautiful performance knows they just kind of can't even remember it. But I just felt so relieved. I felt proud of myself because also one of the things about winning or achieving something great in sport is in a way you're paying back all the people who believed in you. Parents who've invested in you, partners who've been patient with you, kids who've let you go do your training, friends who don't see you as much. Like I've skipped friends' wedding because I was racing in China and, I always think about that I wish I'd gone to her wedding. Yeah. But I did win this race in China that I did. So we make sacrifices as athletes, and sometimes winning is actually our currency, our language to say, I love you, thank you for supporting me, I get to be great and you get to celebrate in that. And I feel like, we've been seeing this with the NBA, the Knicks, all of these family members are like, oh my goodness, thank goodness my son or my partner or my brother gets to be great and we were part of that.
Because it absolutely takes a village, and parents, especially for young athletes, like you don't realize how much time, money and effort your parents put in until you start having to pay your own bills and getting your own self to training and things like that. Yeah, it's absolutely incredible incredible. And as you say, you sacrifice a lot to be an athlete. And yes, it is a choice and it is a privilege, but that doesn't take away the fact that you do sacrifice a lot. You say no to a lot of big milestone things. You don't get to socialize as much. You have to be a lot more strict with your nutrition, diet, recovery, and all those things. And I agree. Like once you actually reach the pinnacle of success, it is a big ode back to those people as well as yourself.
Yeah. And also no cyclist is ever going to make money like a tennis player or golf player and say, Mum, thank you. Here's a house. I bought you a car. Just buy you some jam that's very expensive.
I don't think you can put a price on a world record though. Straight to the pool room, that one.
Sure.
Yeah. So you went from being the female athlete on this side of things where, you know, the system wasn't really built for you and you had to fight tooth and nail. You overcame stereotypes. You didn't listen to people when they said you're too old, and you achieved what you needed to achieve to prove yourself right, which I really love. Tell me now how it was to then go to the other side where you became the head of the Office for Women in Sport and Recreation for the first time. You were the inaugural head. And what was the state of women's sport when you came into that role, and how did they approach you, and what were you sort of set out to try and fix?
So the Victorian government had done this inquiry into women and girls in sport and recreation. It was led by Peggy O'Neill, former chair of Richmond Football Club. And they had this great panel of people. And what they wanted to look into, and it was just for Victoria, was what are the state of sporting facilities in regional Victoria like? What are the numbers of women who are on sporting boards, and how are the rates of participation of women and girls in sport? And they were all below what they were for boys and men, and way, way below 50%. So the government said, we need to establish an office that can address the recommendations that came from this report. And they advertised for this job, and 100 people applied. And if I remember someone sent me a message and said, hey, I've just seen this job. I was working at the Epworth Hospital as a behaviour change physician. They said, you should apply for that. And I thought, I don't know how to work in the public service. Like, I don't know what that means. And so I applied, and it was a really long process, as anyone who's ever come from outside government. And you think, this is taking months. And finally, I got the job, which was amazing, because I know there were some very, very impressive women and men probably that applied. But perhaps there were Olympians and gold medalists and, you know, and administrators. And maybe I was just the grey mix of all of that. And so the remit was, here are the 9 recommendations, here's a very tiny amount of money, and go and fix them all by a certain amount of time. And I had 3 staff that I could hire, and those 3 women have been some of the closest friends I've had in a long time. 2 of them in particular, amazing, incredible trailblazers in their own right. And we worked in the sport and rec department, but what our role was is to go and basically educate people about the value and the benefit of gender equality. Why do you want girls' change rooms? Why do you want to drive participation? And you asked about what was the state of women's sport at the time. So the office was announced in 2017. So it was about 3 months after AFLW Season 1 and the big lockout that happened at Icon Park. But it was still before the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2019, which I think really globally propelled the kind of questions around equal pay. It was before the famous Taylor Harris kick, and how are women being treated online, and how are those double standards being applied to women's appearances. It was before the T20 Women's World Cup, when we were trying to fill the G. So our work was definitely closely linked to the ICC and to Cricket Australia, and let's see if we can fill the MCG for the final of the T20 Women's World Cup. So it was an amazing time. If it had been 5 years earlier, it might have been really hard. But suddenly we were also bidding for the FIFA Women's World Cup. So high performance women's sport was on everyone's mind. They'd seen pictures of Megan Rapinoe and Taylor Harris and Sam Kerr and Elise Perry and Alyssa Healy. They knew that it was really bad, that girls are getting changed in cars to go and play soccer and cricket and footy out in Benalla and Bendigo. And they said, this is terrible. Why don't girls have change rooms in sporting clubs? And they also knew there was a lot more data coming out that said having diverse boards and more than 0 or 1 woman on a board is actually good for performance. But it was still an uphill slog. I mean, as we still see, most of the decision makers and people with power in sport in Australia, white men, they're usually very strongly connected to broadcast or media rights, and we don't see enough money from broadcast deals going into women's sport like Super Netball. So we're still seeing a terrible imbalance. We have not fixed everything. Just because everyone watched that Matildas game against France and then against England doesn't mean we've fixed gender inequality in sport. And just because we're seeing women in the WNBA getting paid millions of dollars for the first time ever doesn't mean the average experience for a girl in Australia is a bit ordinary. And then we look at the particular groups of people who are having a really hard time. So women and girls and non-binary people from the LGBTQI community, people with disability, Aboriginal Victorians or Aboriginal Australians who experience racism, and just where doors are closed to people because they don't look right, sound right, or they're not amazing straight away, or their family speaks a different language, it's much harder to just even participate, let alone excel. So we know that white, cisgendered, able-bodied women with tertiary degrees, we do fine. I've got plenty of privilege and I can talk about what the issues are, but I think we still see a dominance of the voices and decision makers being men in Australia, and there needs to be a levelling of that playing field.
And this is the golden question, but how? How do we level it? What needs to happen in the next 5 to 10 years so that gender equality goes up, so the participation is, far beyond girls dropping out of sport at twice the rate of boys at 14 or 15. What are some steps to get there?
So the people in power on decision making need to care about it. So when we talk about broadcast deals, because I was on ABC Radio just this week talking about the Super Netball broadcast deal compared to the AFL one, when the outgoing CEO of the AFL a couple of years ago was talking about that $4.5 billion deal with Disney. And now we're seeing Super Netball next year from 27 onwards is going to be 5 years of free-to-air. Now, free-to-air is great for fans, but that doesn't fill me with excitement that someone is wanting to hand over a big chunk of cash to broadcast the 8 best teams of netball in the Southern Hemisphere. And why not? Netball's an amazing game. Those athletes are insane and they should get paid more. So I think we need people who care and say, I know it's hard, but we're going to do it anyway. We need not to take that easy route. So, for example, as I mentioned earlier, I commentate the Women's Tour de France on SBS. We still don't broadcast that entire race from the beginning, from the start line. We pick the race up about a third or even a half into the race. So you're not seeing all the action. It'd be like only showing the second half of a footy match on TV. You wouldn't do it. But we don't do that for the men.
Right.
So we've got to stop. I think it's very nuanced. And I remember this conversation happening when the FIFA Women's World Cup bid was happening, was we're judging women's performances, women athletes, their actual kicking capability or their speed or whatever it is by the men's metrics. And we say, she can't kick it as far, therefore it's boring, therefore we're not going to show it. And I know you've spoken about this many times on your podcast, is if you had 100 years of investment in a particular game, like the men's game, no kidding, the men are better. No kidding, the 14-year-old boys are better than the 14-year-old girls. What we're seeing now for the first time in AFLW is a whole generation of girls that haven't had to stop playing footy, who started with Auskick, and their skills are wild and amazing. And no disrespect to the season 1 in 2017, but there were plenty of women there that weren't actually super fit or amazing skills. They just knew how to play footy. So you also need to stop judging women's sport as requiring the same ROI, or return on investment, or the same metrics. Like if we're going to have a sponsor and the sponsor goes, unless I make back 4 times, blah, 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 I'm not going to put my money into the WNBL. So you need champions and you need policies that require a certain investment, or you need Visit Victoria to make sure they bid for enough games. And why are they buying NFL games to come out here in September? Again... So it requires investment. And if you ask, and I'm no fan of Commonwealth Bank, I don't know anything about them as a company, but I know that they got in it early with the Matildas and they said, we will not seek to make any money out of this sponsorship until 10 years down the track. They said it's an investment.
Yes.
So you have to think differently about that and look at the LA women's team in the National Women's Soccer League. It's a distributed ownership model. A lot of women owners. They have amazing social investment where they go back and invest in the communities in LA where a lot of the players have come from. Very low socioeconomic backgrounds for a lot of these players. And so they have a socially and ethically conscious business model, and it's one of the most successful women's soccer teams in the United States.
That's really important too, at the long-term partnerships, because it's all well and good to throw your name and brand on, the FIFA World Cup when it's here, but, what are you doing for the 4 or 5 years lead up to that? And I think that's something that CommBank, as you say, do very well. And when you think of the Matildas, like personally, if I shut my eyes and think of the Matildas, I see CommBank. So it's like perfect brand alignment that brands need to be smarter with. And it's going to bring them money, but it's not going to bring them money overnight. It is a long-term investment.
Well,
and like any
also,
investment,
we're
it does
hearing
take time.
from that Deloitte report that's been published late last year and early this year that there are thousands of companies that want to invest in women's sport. And the economic return on women's sport, most of it's due to the United States and the big sports over there, is in the billions. So it's a good business model. Also, women athletes are safe.
Yes.
They're safe investments. They're very unlikely to get arrested for drink driving, date rape, sexual assault, violence. They're trusted brands. The children in our households look up to them. Parents want to meet them and get their autographs. And you talk about closing your eyes and thinking about the Matildas. We can all name Matildas. I couldn't name any of the Socceroos until the SBS ad came out the other day. And I go, okay, cool. Now I know. And now that two of them have scored goals, I know who Irukunda and Metcalf are. And Beach, the goalkeeper, because he's amazing.
Yeah.
But so I can name a lot of women athletes because I follow sport and I know who they are, but I also know their stories and I identify with them.
And that documentary that they did for the Matildas before the World Cup, that was genius, wasn't
great.
it? Because again, it's a human connection. You learn about them, where they came from, and you want to be part of their story. And then it worked out perfectly with how it all went in Australia, and it's the Matilda effect. But it just goes to show the power of awareness, visibility and storytelling. And if we can tie all those things into women's sport, it's only going to benefit sponsors.
Exactly.
That's right. You also did a brief stint on the Collingwood board before COVID broke out. In that brief stint, what insights did that give you into how Australian sport is being run?
It's pretty shocking. I mean, I learned so much being on that board, and you're right, it was less than a year. And then the COVID response role became really demanding and I couldn't stay on the board. And it was just at the time that Eddie Maguire had left the board. They had a netball program at the time, their women's program. This was now season 5, I believe, of AFLW, and the Collingwood women's team had just really failed to fire. They'd been one of the foundation clubs, as we know, and they're one of the biggest clubs from a membership perspective in the country. But my observation was that they just didn't want to do what it took to make sure those players were safe, encouraged, enabled, and really given the time and the attention they deserved. Now, they might say, well, there was a soft cap and there were challenges and the Super Netball didn't allow all of the things, and as we know, they ended up giving up their Magpies netball licence. But I think it's pretty hard to get any oxygen for two women's teams in a club like Collingwood, where pretty much every staff member is just focused on, did the men's team win on the weekend? Are we going to win again? Will he play? Will he play? Will Buckley keep his job? Who'll be the new coach? There's so much attention on the men's football team that even bits of the area of the inside the club that should have been used for the netball program to stretch and cool down, or, like just having access to the grounds and the equipment and the right coaching staff. Now, again, from what I understand, so many clubs are doing this a lot better. But I also learned that there are people who just want to be on AFL boards. They don't want to do anything on them.
Okay.
And I think it's a huge privilege to be on you're a volunteer, you're not getting paid, but you're there to represent not just members, but AFL gets a lot of column inches and a lot of bandwidth in the state of Victoria. And it was at a time when Collingwood was grappling with the response to allegations of racism, and they'd published a Do Better report about how players feel in their environment and whether or not they were experiencing racism. So I think we know sport can hold up a mirror to all of our best and our worst behaviours. And there is still so much more the AFL can do, and the AFL as an entity and the clubs can do, to prevent violence against women, to not be racist, to be inclusive of the LGBTQI community, and to make those players have a good career and then be able to retire safely without concussion, without lifelong injuries. And yet, as we know, it's professional sport, it's a business. And I think it would be very hard to manage that tension as a club president or a CEO. And there are some clubs that are doing it better than others.
And what are just some key things that allow for, more psychological safety within the clubs, allow for better education in the clubs around, especially now, like the homophobic slurs are still happening far too frequently. Are the punishments enough, or is it not so much about punishment but more about education early? What can they do about it?
Yeah. I suspect, because I've never had a problem calling things out, but I know that that's hard. And I think it's hard for men. I'm not giving them a free pass on this, but we all know good men that don't say anything when someone else in a sporting environment or a work or a social environment says something racist, homophobic or sexist, and they just say nothing, and it's just as bad because what you're doing is basically kind of saying, hey, that's okay that you just said that. So I think it's about giving people the language. How do I actually say, hey, Macca, that's rubbish. We don't speak like that. I saw a brilliant interview with David Pocock, who's an independent member of parliament, federal senator, saying that when he was in the Wallabies, they sat down as a group and said, what do we want to do to make sure any gay player in our team is safe? What's our job? How do we do that? Because the interviewer had said, how was it that you came up to a player on another team and said, I heard what you just said. That's not cool. You don't speak like that to anyone. And he said, I'm just trying to, it's not on gay and lesbian players to educate everybody and kind of teach everyone how to be better. It's on allies and the people who are in the majority to say, hey, we don't speak that way around our teammates. We don't use those words. We don't use the N-word to describe African players in our teams. We don't use disparaging language and call people men girls to make them seem weak, But someone who's in a position of safety, i.e. in Pocock's situation, he's a straight man in the team, for him to be able to do that is very powerful. It's supportive of his teammate and it also he's in a position of physical safety. He's a big, strong, person. You don't have to be a big Pocock-sized person to speak out though. I think in my experience, being a good upstander is a muscle that you have to practice flexing. It starts with, and I've been at functions where I've been there with a young team member and we were about to be interviewed. I was about to be interviewed for something and she was just there to help me out for work. And this guy called her Sweetie. And I said to him very calmly, her name's Heather. It's not Sweetie. And he was like, well, sorry. Just, he did that thing that people do. And then he walked away. And she came up to me and said, oh my God, that was mind blowing. I've never seen anyone actually do that in real time. And I said, well, if you don't do it in real time now, you just got to be able to be better at that. And we've all got to and practice it. And whether it's not just about gender and race and sexuality, it's also about, hey, I don't want to keep talking like this. Maybe you and I have a terrible disagreement about politics. We're never going to resolve it. And you say, I don't really like how this conversation's going. Do you mind if we stop talking about Gaza? Because you and me are never going to agree. Or do you mind if we stop talking about this particular thing? Because I don't feel like it's going in a respectful direction. Now, practicing saying that, whether you're at school or at uni or in your sporting team, actually shows the other person that you have boundaries and you have self-respect or you have respect for your teammate who she or he or they might be in a different position and don't feel safe. So we can all be that person. You don't have to be the captain. You don't have to be the tall, strong, physically capable one, but you can say, hey, we don't use those words here.
And then that's going to encourage other people to also stand up.
You give them the language.
That's right.
And you're role modelling it, literally role modelling it.
Yeah. And one thing, we've said on this podcast a lot too is, as you mentioned earlier, just because you didn't say it does not mean that you're not guilty of it. It is probably worse because you're enabling it and the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. So too often when we hear men say, and more broadly around women's sport, it doesn't affect me. Well, there's no world where women's sport and how women are treated in sport and around is not going to affect you because you will have a mother, you will have a wife, a partner, a daughter. It may not affect you directly now, but it will 100% indirectly affect you and your loved ones in the future or, in the present. So,
and also, we have a really terrible problem with violence against women in this country, and we know it starts with a lack of respect. So if you're making jokes or being disrespectful or laughing at those things or enabling them, that is it's a continuum of behaviour where you get to a point where you find out that your friend actually is a coercive controller of his partner or he's been physically abusive towards her or, my goodness, the worst case scenario has actually harmed her or his children. So it's an important conversation to have. It's not always, the thing is, it's not always a nice thing to talk about. But in fact, the more we aerate some of these things, the more people feel like, oh, okay, there are people all amongst us who might have been in dynamics, relationships, workplaces where they've been bullied. And people don't always want to talk about that and say, oh, I was bullied or I was discriminated against, because they don't want to appear weak or vulnerable or they don't want to complain. But actually saying, oh, that happened to me and it was really bad and I got some help and I left that job or I left that relationship and I wish I'd left earlier, but I feel good that I did it. Like, they're the kinds of stories we also need to hear from people.
Now, I just want to be respectful of your time because I know you're a very busy woman. But let's end on some key advice from your whole career as a professional athlete to everything you're doing now. What advice would you give to, say, a 16-year-old girl who may really want to go after a passion, whether that's sport, whether that's music, whatever it is, but maybe has a coach, a teacher who says, you're not good enough, you're too old, which at 16, hopefully they're not having those conversations. But what would you just say to her?
Well, find people who support you. Share those dreams and those ambitions with the right people so that you're not around the naysayers and the negative people. But also know that most of the time when people are saying those things, it often comes from a place of care. They actually just don't want you to fail and be sad. That's nice. But guess what? We're going to fail and we're going to be sad. Like, trying to do anything is going to lead to failure, if you want to use that word. So I would say don't be afraid of failing at stuff. And you're going to keep failing at it until you either decide that you don't want to do it anymore because you're not right for it, your body, your mind, your time, whatever all of those circumstances are. Or you actually get better at it and you go, oh, wow, I can't believe now I'm 26, it's 10 years later and I'm actually like in the top 5 tennis players in this country because my pace of improvement was different from everybody else's. So if you love something and you're good at it, oh my goodness, do it. What I notice now, and I've got 2 nieces and I've got lots of friends with teenage kids, is there's a little bit of too much nonchalance going on. That trying is a bit cringe. Please, sweet baby Jesus, try at stuff, whether it is sport or music or a job you really want to have or a uni degree you want to get into or passion that you have. Care about something enough. Life is too short. We are so lucky. Most of us are very fortunate in this country. We are in safe family environments and we have food and shelter. And I know I'm sounding like an old person now, but we are generally in this conflict-free country where we get education, we get healthcare, we get people around us. We can find people around us. Maybe our parents or our teachers aren't going to be our number one fans. You need to find who those number one fans are and share that dream and go, okay, I really want to do this. I'm going to audition for that. Or I'm going to go to those tryouts. Or I'm going to put my hand up for the draft. And if I don't get it, and this happens to me all the time, apply for jobs, don't get it. No one says, wow, you're such a loser. They say, what a bummer. What's next?
Yeah. And if you try and you don't succeed, you are where you are now, right? So you haven't lost anything. In fact, you've gone, you've tried, you've probably learnt 1 or 2 things that you can apply to the next thing. So I think the real failure is not trying at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what would you go back and tell your 16-year-old self, knowing what you know now?
You're right. You're going to be great. Not when you want to be, not in time, not when you're 20, but you're going to just keep doing it. Keep doing all of the things that you're doing because you're right about yourself. You feel, I wanted to be extraordinary. I got to be extraordinary a few times at a few different things. And I would just say to her, you're going to do it.
If you could have a conversation with her and tell her all the incredible stuff you're going to do, what is your most proud achievement from everything?
That's a hard one.
We ask the big questions here.
I did get to interview Billie Jean King on a stage ahead of International Women's Day in 2020, just before the pandemic.
And before it was recorded.
Back in the day, 2020. God. She is just an absolute hero. This is a woman who risked her tennis career to highlight the lack of gender equality in tennis, the lack of pay equality, and ultimately became an icon and the reason the WTA was established. Her story is amazing. So you don't have to be a tennis fan to know about Billie Jean King. But what I saw of her is a woman who has for decades kept telling the same very simple story, which is you've got to believe in yourself. You've got to be willing to put stuff on the line. You've got to be willing to lose stuff to gain it. And to feel like I had gotten myself into a position where I was fortunate enough to meet her, to interview her in front of hundreds of people, and then have her come to our lunch and speak at that lunch where I gave a speech about leadership. And then we all walked across the MCG to watch Australia win the T20. That whole weekend was amazing. And then it became a super spreader event. And we all went into lockdown. So it was kind of like,
the last hurrah.
So yeah, maybe that weekend and the work our office did to actually make that happen was a huge team effort.
Well, I know you said earlier that when you were younger, you struggled with being present and just realising all the incredible things that you have achieved. But I hope you are, in fact, sitting back now and realising what an incredible life you've already lived and all that's still to come. I know that you'll be finding the next big thing to do, but Yeah, you've been such a trailblazer for women in sport. And on behalf of all the women, girls who are coming through, thank you for everything that you've done and for the messaging today that age is just a number, that if you're passionate and you believe in yourself about something, to go after it unapologetically, fail, and then, set your mind on something else if that's not the right thing. Just having the courage and the audacity to go after what you want, I think, is the key takeaway from this episode. So thank you so much for joining.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Thank you very much. If you got value from today's episode, which I know you did, please go and like and subscribe to 4TG_podcast. This episode was brought to you by Project Better. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.